Hello and welcome to Eye on Ocean County. I'm Laura Jones. Our guest this half hour is Deborah Howlett. She is president of New Jersey Policy Perspective, a liberal think tank. Good to have you here.
Nice to be here.
And it's okay calling it a liberal progressive think tank.
Yes, we are.
Well, let's talk a little bit about property taxes. We've heard so much over the summer in the legislature, the governor, the legislature dealing with property tax caps. You had a 2.9 cap, then you had a 2.5 cap, and now it's a 2.0 cap. Who knows by the time this airs if there's going to be a cap. But the goal is to cap spending at the local level. And you think that this is, but most people are saying, oh, well, that's a good idea. You cap it. So that's good. That's going to lower my property taxes. You don't think so?
It won't lower anybody's property taxes, Laura. In fact, it's guaranteed to increase them every year by at least 2%. It's clear property taxes are an issue in New Jersey. They're too high. But it's not because there's no control over local government. Sure, there are things that could be done differently, consolidations that could be made, better decisions could be made. But there's an inherent problem in New Jersey's tax structure, and just simply capping property taxes and saying that's all they can grow in a given year, to us, is bad policy. It doesn't address the root issue. It won't reduce anybody's property taxes, as I said, and it endangers schools. Class sizes for students will have to get bigger because there'll be less money to fund schools. Emergency response times from police and fire will get slower because there's less money. There'll be fewer police officers, fewer firefighters. So it will have a direct effect on quality of life issues like schools and police and fire, even libraries and garbage collections.
Well, what the governor has said is, listen, we're trying to get a control on the spending, and this isn't the end-all be-all. He's got a toolkit to help mayors manage this, but it is a good first step. You don't think it's a step that should be taken at all? No,
we don't think it's good policy. I think this just slides the problem over to local government and allows and forces mayors to deal with the real issues of how to balance their budgets. The toolkit that the governor has talked about, these 30-some bills, are directed at giving mayors the power to negotiate with unions in an unequal and unfair way.
Like police and fire, teachers, things
sure.
like that,
so
or their public
all
employees.
Of those contracts, all of those public employee contracts for teachers, for police officers, the clerk down at town hall, the librarian in your local library, all of their contracts will now not be able to increase by more than 2% a year. So the cap has already limited any pay raises they could get, regardless of what inflation is, or regardless of what they deserve, because you have a limited amount of resources. And there are other bills in this toolkit that allow the mayors and town councils and school boards to impose even tougher restrictions and sanctions on contract negotiations if the unions don't agree. So from that perspective, it's a bad deal for communities. I think the mayors have said, I think I heard Bill Dressel, who's the lobbyist for the mayors, say that they will take the cap, but they want it not to be the focal point of this package. They want these contract negotiation reforms to be the focal point and the cap to sort of be the end piece.
Right. Well, you say this doesn't get at the root problem. What is the root problem then in New Jersey?
Well, the reason property taxes are so high in New Jersey is because local governments are almost entirely dependent on property taxes to pay for what they do. In other states, there are many different ways local government is funded. If you go across the river to Pennsylvania, they have local income tax and local sales tax, which we don't have in New Jersey. Other states have taxes on personal property, cars or boats or what have you.
Well, is that just robbing from Peter to pay Paul? It's just a different tax. Instead of having a property tax, you've got a local income tax.
Well, a local income one of the benefits of a local income tax is that it's based on ability to pay. A property tax is not based on your ability to pay. It's based on whatever the assessor happens to say your property is worth. And when property started skyrocketing in 2000, when people were glad that, you know, their housing values doubled, but what goes along with that is a doubling and even tripling of property taxes.
And that hits people like seniors who may have bought their home 30 years ago. They're still in it. The house is paid for. They're on a fixed income. That's who really suffers from that.
And if they had to pay an income tax versus a property tax, their tax bill would be much lower. Because if you own a $500,000 house, it doesn't matter whether you make $1 a year or $1 million a year. You are going to pay the same amount of taxes. Right. That's one of the structural problems. And there hasn't been a discussion of how to fix that inherent problem. The only other source besides property taxes for local government funding comes from state aid. And along with what we've seen is a cap on property taxes to straitjacket local officials is a decrease in what the state is providing. So at the same time they can't raise property taxes, the state aid is declining. And this year for schools it was $1.2 million. Well, statewide, schools collect $12 billion a year in property taxes. $1.2 billion a year in state aid taken away is a 10% increase just to maintain what they had the year before. That's not adding anything on. So there is all kinds of pressure on local government, schools and towns and counties to take huge cuts because they won't be able to increase property taxes.
It seems like the general consensus is, all right, well, it's good to try and control spending, but really when push comes to shove and people start hearing about layoffs, and that's what mayors, I believe, and I've talked to Bill Dressel, who heads up the League of Municipalities, represents all of the mayors of the states. That's what they're concerned about. If they have these caps and they don't have the power to renegotiate contracts, that they are going to have to lay off. Exactly. But could this force towns and areas to look at consolidating and really perhaps where there is some overlap, where there should be some shared services?
Sure, I think that's one of the other options, is finding some economy of scale and combining towns. The town I live in is one of the donut hole towns. We're a little borough inside of a larger township, and there is a lot of duplication of services. But there are several different parts to it. And to go back to the cap, if you cap taxes this year, it will help this year, and maybe next year you'll say, okay, things are under control. But 10 or 20 years from now, there will be no room for growth. If inflation outpaces the increases, there's just decline and decline and decline, year after year of decline. And I don't think, people don't want high property taxes, but I don't think they want a decline in schools and the services that they get through their towns. So that's one of the reasons that we consider it a bad policy.
One of the things right now, under the Corzine administration, there was a 4% cap on property taxes. But one of the things the governor has said is he wants to put this in the Constitution. And the legislature said, no way. Because of what you're saying, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. And the Senate President, Steve Sweeney, has said, you know, we would like to even start perhaps a study team to look to see, you know, as things change. And that's why, to be able to adjust to that. And the legislature was very firm on saying we do not want this on the Constitution. We want this as a referendum. Do you think that this was the first time we've seen this governor compromise on anything?
It's interesting. I think that's right. I think that the Democrats put their foot down about amending the Constitution, and I think there are a lot of folks, especially in the legal community, who would say that's not what amendments to the Constitution are designed for. That's what statutes are designed for, to do it statutorily. So I think there was a good policy argument. I think there was a good legal argument against amending the Constitution, and the Democrats were bipartisan in their support of the budget. They gave the governor enough votes to pass through his budget, and caused a lot of anger among their folks. Oh, yeah. And I think the governor realized that if he persisted in demanding a constitutional amendment, that it would create huge problems. And so the better part of valor was back down a little bit, get what he could, chop it back to 2.0, and then declare victory and move on.
Right, right. Well, and the Democrats, they're also, or actually, well, I don't know if either side
declared victory too.
Although
so.
and then I talked to them afterwards, and then they're like, well, neither of us is really declaring victory. So if nobody won, then the taxpayers won. So that's yet to be determined.
Well, it's a win-win-win. I don't know.
Win-win-win. Who knows? Who knows? All right, we're going to talk about that more about the budget. We'll dive into the millionaire's tax. Deb Howlett, president of New Jersey Policy Perspective, is our guest this half hour. Stay with us here on Eye on Ocean County.